of our religion, okay? But we don't claim that it was written by God. And that's okay. We have different venues of faith. We have different ways to approach this.
Okay, so why? Okay, sorry.
But to me, you're now like if we take this into consideration with what you said before,
yes.
With what you said with this building that you were talking about. So now you say you've got the thesis there that says like this book was written or was in some way authored by God, or a divine spirit or whatever. So yeah, but I could construct such a one.
No. There's no objective criteria. Like I remember I told you that Al-Bihar, there's 16 different genres in the Arabic language. And the Quran fills none of these 16. It's completely different genres. All the challenge is telling you is produce a chapter like that's it. Nobody can see it's subjective. See the Quran is not challenging bring something more beautiful, aesthetics right. That's subjective. The Quran is telling you to meet the objective criteria.
Yeah, okay, but still that to me doesn't. I'm sorry, but that doesn't prove anything.
No, you missed the next verse. It says the Quran makes the claim you will never be able to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Which human being ever makes the claim like that? If I was still, you're saying Bolt, for example, he says I'm the fastest man. Would he ever say no one will make the chance? Never. Why? Because it's relative.
Still, doesn't.
I think, if I may explain it, you know that bottle that he's got in his hands?
Yeah.
Just imagine he makes the claim, you cannot make a bottle like this exactly like it. Similar to it, or similar to it.
Yeah. But
And you bring a bottle, similar, how can he make a claim like that? Because you think like, why is it impossible? But the way the Quranic challenge is something that is if you appreciate the nature of the challenge, you'll realize only when you know the objective nature of the challenge.
He's better explained than me.
Because when it comes to prose and poetry and any literature, any genre of linguistics, it doesn't make sense to us to think that why is it not imitable? We can imitate it. We can imitate Shakespeare. We can imitate Homer. We can anyone. That's how human beings think, because this is just composition. There might be someone out there bright enough, clever enough, intelligent enough to make imitations of things. Okay, so if you have Beethoven with his very interesting symphony, you can get someone imitating this. It's not a problem. That's how we think. But the Quran is in a particular linguistic genre, and yet it came with a particular composition that on the surface level you think it's possible. But when you look at the objective challenge, then when you find out that you cannot. Only when you scrutinize it, closely enough, then you realize that you can't match it. That you can't actually bring something like it, because it becomes something nonsensical. It doesn't make a meaningful sentence. So when you have a composition, a particular structure of a sentence, if I'm speaking to you now, so far, I hope that I haven't made any grammatical mistakes in the English language. But if I said something like this in such a way that you realize, I'm making grammatical mistakes, I'm not speaking English anymore, then he will say it's not making much sense. Gradually you can start speaking gibberish. Did I speak English to you? You immediately think like, this didn't sound like English. It sounded like what? I don't know. I was just making gibberish statements. So if I made a gibberish statement like that and I said that was English and make it imitated, would you be able to? Because you didn't even know what are you imitating. So the Quran came in Arabic language, meaningful, eloquent, beautiful, all of that. Yet the structure and the composition is such that it is not possible. So that's why, if you have given the example of a building, well, to appreciate that, so that this is one example, because I think it hits the point, when you, and it makes sense. Imagine this fence, right? You've got this fence. See how solid it is. And imagine I told you all of this fence, you see, this is like, my hand goes through. But actually it's solid, but it's transparent, whatever the word you want to use. And if I say bring something like it, and yet like he's kneeling on it, and yet my hand just goes through it, like if I did that, you won't be able to bring something like it. You won't be able to, because you know that this structure, this material that is now, it looks transparent, and it just, what's the word? Like it goes through it, and yet he's kneeling on it. You can, put something like that and so on.
Invisibility cloak, like Harry Potter.
Yeah. So If you knew the reality of that by close observation, you would know that you cannot imitate something. You can't manufacture something like that. Quran, unfortunately for the people who don't believe, is of such a nature that it presents to them an obstacle of an intellectual challenge. And that's why the Quran actually challenges people. In fact, this is called the Tahaddi, the challenge of the Quran. If you are in doubt, then produce something like it, whole book like it, 10 chapters like it, or 1 chapter like it. The Quran gives you all of these. How so? For all of these years, people studying Arabic language at SOAS, they are. Harvard, yes, they are. In all the major universities in the world where there are Arabic language being studied, why aren't those professors of Arabic language who are not Muslims say, okay, let me make a small composition like 3 lines, the smallest chapter of the Quran. Why are they unable?
I was going to say we're going to have to leave it a minute, but I was going to have one last question just from a genuine interest in
so this
history
is,
of Islam.
Sure.
If you have
So
another question.
please do. But the point on this, I'm just going to summarize that.
Oh yeah.
This is what we call a falsification test for the Quran. Like he's been telling you, the Quran gives its own falsification test that once you apply it, if it doesn't fulfill this criteria, you can reject it because you know it cannot be from God. But if you cannot falsify it, like with this test, and it still stands, then you really seriously have to consider how so. Because only God can make or produce or reveal a book like it.
I gave you 2 references, even from non-Arabic speakers, and they master the Arabic language. Like, for example, you have Professor Raymond Farron, you have Dr. McBride. They appreciate the challenge, and they have to resort back to say this is divine revelation.
My last question, it's as a genuine interest in like the history of Islam. Where do you believe that like the people first found the Quran? Where was the first instance of people coming into contact with it? Yeah, of course.
You need to elaborate your question a bit further. Because in our belief, maybe when I explain what we believe, it may answer your question. So we believe for the 40 years of his life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, of course, he did not receive any divine revelation.
Okay.
He was someone who is called Hanif, in a way, someone who has the natural inclination already to believe in a super being, almighty, be upright, and not to worship idols and so on and so forth. Okay? But at the age of 40, God revealed through an angel, a medium, this revelation. So when he was 40 years old, this is he received. About 5 or so verses, first verses in the surah. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. This is how you start. Read in the name of your Lord who created. Read in the name of your Lord who created. This is the first revelation of the Quran. Not believe, but recite, proclaim, read. That makes the difference between every other religion. About faith in Islam is about how we come to believe by studying, reading, reflecting, acquiring knowledge. So then the story goes like he went, down from the mountain because he was in a cave contemplating, and he was with his wife and saying, "Cover me up," because he was shaking of this experience. So with this encounter, this was the first revelation. Eventually, he was getting more and more revelation, and then Angel Gabriel, who revealed the Quran to him, was explaining to him and comforting him. He is the messenger of revelation, the angel revealing to him, and then the Prophet started getting scribes to write him down because he did not know how to read and write. So historically speaking, the Quran got written down during the presence of the Prophet by professional scribes, and they were memorizing it. Yeah. So you have 2 forms of transmission of the text. One is by graphic form, written form, and one is by preservation through the heart, to the memory. So that continued, and we can now direct you to manuscripts of the Quran in museums, in libraries, in private hands, where are they within the 1st century of Islam. More than 90, almost, numbers going, 2, 3, 4, 5%, like this, numbers increasing. Of the whole of the text of the Quran, we have percentage-wise, from the first 100 years of Islam, compared to some other religious texts which you have 0%.
Like the Bible, for example.
Yeah, if you want to name that. There's nothing within the 1st century of Christ in terms of revelation, but we have now this Quranic text obtained from manuscripts around the world and so on. Birmingham manuscript, only a few pages, very early, from the 1st century of Islam. You know, in UK, we have in UK, can you believe that, in Birmingham Library. So textual transmission has a robust history where we can be sure that it hasn't undergone some corruption and like, because if you want to know whether this is indeed the pure, unadulterated divine revelation, you have to have some element of knowledge about historical transmission. And you can see that Ramadan just been only, how many days ago? 2 weeks ago. In this month of Ramadan, all around the world, the whole Quran was being recited from beginning to end, cover to cover, word for word, letter for letter, sound for sound, vowel for vowels, by someone from memory. All of it. Throughout the masajid's mosque around the world. Hundreds and thousands, if not, so many. And the Quran this is the way how it's been preserved. So that you can be at least sure that the Quran, that if we were to offer you one, you know that, okay, I'm pretty much sure that's what the Prophet who claimed to be a prophet of God, that is what he left behind. Yeah.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your time.
No problem. No, it's a pleasure speaking to both of you. If I offend you, I apologize. Anything.
What are your names? What are your names?
Lucas.
Luca?
And Kate.
Kate, very pleasure speaking to you. So if we have somehow given you an introduction to Islam and to the Quran, so we hope you take this forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Have a good Sunday.
You too.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.